Hey everybody, welcome to the Double Stuff Podcast. We are double the hosts, double the topics, double the fun, and I'm Sarah.
I'm Alan.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Charity.
And today we are recording our podcast with a wonderful invention called podcast equipment, a Yamaha thing.
A Yamaha thing. We're off to a great start.
Yeah.
We're using microphones and cables
We're using
and computers.
technologies.
We're using magnets and wave and voice.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so our topic is dealing with inventions and cool discoveries and stuff. You know, this is a wonderful bit of machinery that we're using. We're actually recording ourselves, recording our voices, and it's going through waves in the air. I don't know how it all works, but it's doing things.
It's magic.
And it's also really cool.
We're really putting our degrees to work today.
We are. Things do stuff, and we like it like that. But it gives you something to appreciate because I'm a big fan of history, and I like learning about the origins of things.
Yeah.
So even just to the effect of just, like I said, we're recording sound. And even about, 150, actually not even that many years ago, we couldn't really do that. We were just now starting to do photography and all that kind of stuff. 140, 150 years, that's not really a lot of time that has gone by that we've been able to use this kind of technology to record ourselves, whether it's visually or audibly or anything else. And it's just really cool. There's a lot of inventions and discoveries that we use on a regular basis that we take for granted all the time, that if we were to hop into a time machine and go back 300-400, maybe even 3,000 or 4,000 years, this stuff wouldn't exist. And how the heck as a modern society would be able to handle that now? So even,
We're talking like Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court kind of stuff.
Ooh.
I mean, that's a good place to start.
That's a good place to start. So let's go to King Arthur's Court, Alan.
Okay. All right. Well, the moral of that story is like technology is seen as like evil magic.
Yeah.
Back then. We might need to go forward a little bit.
Rack focus.
That's right.
It's like, shoo, man, the trip I've been.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. Like
to have like fire on demand.
Yeah.
To be able to have
like electricity.
Oh yeah, electricity. Think about it like
running water.
Sanitary.
Indoor plumbing.
Yeah, indoor plumbing.
But even think of things that
medicines.
are almost like luxury items. Like we all four of us wear glasses.
Yeah, it's true.
So
we are a bespectacled few.
Yeah, so even something like that I mean, it's sort of a necessity, but it's not like you could still get around in life. It would just be kind of blurry. But it's not something like, oh, we have to have warmth and we have to have food and grow, but.
Well, optics at one point were like state secrets, like Germany and like with Zeiss and everything else. It was heavy technology that needed to be like guarded. And it was under like military institutions where they could figure out like the shape lens and be able to, just making your own lens. You can actually make your own telescope and polish down glass to make your own. But man, it's pretty amazing.
One of the things I thought of, Sarah and I just finished a series of videos for the Wichita-Sedgwick County Historical Museum.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we did, we talked about, they have this exhibit called A Child's World. And so they were talking about how children grew up in that time and some of the old toys or whatever. But when we were talking about, modern technology and stuff, one of the things that they talked about was the pen. And the reason why they wrote in cursive and taught kids to write in cursive is because you had a slow, fluid motion, because you can't, write a letter, pick up the pen, put it back down,
keep the ink flowing.
Yeah. And you had to dip the pen in the ink and then, write or whatever. And so I was just thinking I have a pen right here on the table. That's something that we take for granted,
Absolutely.
But we don't really think about, oh, this is a pen. Someone had to invent this. Someone had to figure out the best possible way to get ink to come out of this pen.
And not for it to just keep flowing whenever you open it.
Yeah, to have a smooth motion that I don't have like ink blots on my paper, and that's something small, or like a paper clip or a staple.
Yeah.
Those things are just really small that we sometimes just throw away. It's just like, oh, I don't need this, or we play with it. I've bent many paper clips out of shape.
Yeah.
Those are things that you don't think about during the day because you use them so much.
So, but what about you, Dan? Is there like something, you just showed us a 1,000-page book prior to recording this episode. And that's another thing, like spoken word writing.
I mean, I think if you're talking about inventions, I think that one of the most vital is the printing press, allowing people to not only share knowledge, but record knowledge. It's crazy to think, for me, to think of like how quickly we adopted ebooks in like a relatively short period of time, right? But ebooks require a battery, like a lithium ion battery that will die eventually, right? Whereas we have paper works that have been printed for hundreds of years that we can, go back and actually still reference and see. So it's like, I think that is just that ability to contain knowledge and pass it along in a unblemished sort of form. I mean, obviously, it's whoever wrote it has their own probably agenda or whatever the case is, but it's not like oral memory like oral sharing of knowledge where it can be kind of forgotten and, misremembered or changed or anything like that.
In our very, very first season, in my topic, we were talking about fairy tales and folklore and stuff. And I had brought up the Brothers Grimm and how one of the big things they did was that they interviewed I don't know how many people and took all of their oral stories and put it down on paper. And that was kind of a radical thing at the time in historic Germany, and maybe even worldwide. I don't know. But but that's the thing, I mean, it's one thing to pass it down from generation to generation by word of mouth. But, when you have it on paper using whatever language and symbols and whatever to actually have the story in documentation, then it's not just, your family that can pass it down. You can send it to other people. And I mean, that's how we know so much about the time periods, that's how we know about how the Egyptians lived and, stuff like that. And, that stuff really intrigues me. I like learning how things are made. I like knowing how things originated. And some things kind of crack me up. Like, okay, so we're called the Double Stuff Podcast, which sounds vaguely similar to an Oreo brand, right? So it's funny when you look up the origin of Oreos. It started out as like this soft biscuit with cream in the inside, and I must admit, because I think it was around the early 1900s when Oreos were invented, or late 1890s. And I guess I try to imagine it in the present day cookies, cream-filled cookies, with people back then, because people were so more prim and proper then than what they are now. Like, you got to imagine somebody in this, wearing the corset and girdles and the Mary Poppins shoes, and they just open up a cookie and lick the inside or something, while they're having their tea and biscuits, and they just start licking the cream-filled center, because that seems so undignified. But it's kind of funny, at least when it comes to food. Like, some of the foods we've had for a long time, like Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper and Pepsi, they've been around for 100+ years. And I think one of the oldest carbonated beverages is Schweppes. Schweppes came out in the 1700s. During
the ginger ale?
The ginger ale.
Okay.
Yeah. It came out around the time. It came out in the 1780s, 1790s. So if you think about it, our forefathers were drinking that, right? So like imagine, while they're writing a Declaration of Independence or some kind of government document, it's like, when you get tired of signing your John Hancocks all day, I like to sit down to a nice carbonated beverage
of
sweat.
Commercials?
Yes. That's how they do it.
I love how in your mind it's all G-rated when they're slamming like hard cider and pirated rum.
That's the cute, naive 21st century Sarah coming out. I imagine all like a 1950s commercial, black and white.
Just trying to survive the winter.
when I almost die of frostbite, I like to drink a nice frozen carbonated beverage of Schweppes.
Exactly.
Well, thinking about inventions and technology, I don't know if this is on the same line, but going back to the videos that we did for the museum, the other exhibit that we did the video for was the Buffalo exhibit.
Buffalo, yeah.
And so it's interesting that when you have inventions and things, they're usually made out of necessity. Sometimes it's out of luxury, like you would prefer to have this over that.
Right.
But a lot of times it's made out of necessity. And so one of the exhibits, they were talking about how the Native Americans would use the buffalo for many things. And it wasn't just, we use the hide for this. And then
they would use every single part.
Yeah, they would use the bones to use it as tools. They would use the hide to make clothes and to have blankets and stuff. They would use the stomach as a cooking pot, and it's really cool that, first of all, that they would think of that.
That's very resourceful.
Yeah, but it's the fact that it actually worked. So, when we think of inventions and technology, we're thinking about, our laptops, our microphones, our podcasting equipment, but even using an animal in its various ways is another form of invention and a use of technology in a way to make life life easier to live.
Yeah, it does make you appreciate too. Well, I mean, and I guess if you think about origins, you know, it would start out like with the buffalo, and then somebody's like, "Man, I wish we could do something like this without using the animal." Well, I do have a piece of metal just sitting here,
Yeah, there you go.
and I do happen to have fire that Ugg the caveman invented. And then, forge. That's a word I'll just use. You know, and then you just start. I don't know. It's like Cherry talked about the paperclip. Apparently, or at least what I remember from school, it's just something that a guy was just playing around with wires one day and kind of bent something. And
look, a tool.
Yeah, this looks interesting, you know, and just doing a little bit of research about the paperclip. I think they were called GEM, G-E-M paperclips is the style that we have now. Like, I think they were invented like back in the 1870s, something like that, 1860s. So probably around, Civil War-ish era. Instead of binding things, like I'm sure that's what they did back then, you have some kind of metallic instrument that you can just clamp it or hold many pieces together. And while that might seem like, well, big deal, paperclip. I mean, I wish I was around to see when it was, when this thing hit this big revolution.
Yeah. It was probably around when they needed to hang ornaments from Christmas trees.
That's true. you know that problem. Whenever I've been fighting the Civil War, I wish I could have some ornaments to hang off of.
But that is a big thing. So it's for a good invention comes up with like its initial use, and then other people decide like, oh, this is also good for this and that and the other. And that's usually what makes an invention like really stick around.
Yeah.
So is there a form of technology or an invention that you prefer the older version of? Because what I'm thinking is...
a little nostalgia?
Well, yeah, because usually when it comes to music, there's some people it's like, oh, I prefer listening to the album versus listening to an MP3, because you get a pure sound. And there's arguments for that. Like I've heard both ways versus like, the pure sound of an album versus the ones and zeros of the MP3, So is there something that you prefer the older version of?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I definitely like modern shoes and apparel.
versus the loincloth you came in with this morning, right?
No, I was talking about think about it. If you had a pair of shoes, to make it stretch, you'd take it to a cobbler and then you'd get a new sole put on it, or you'd do it yourself if you were out in a rural area. I mean, you'd have to, shore your own shoes. Well, not only with your own shoes, I also enjoy having a car, and I would not like to go back to traveling by horse and buggy or whatever it might be.
Even with the car, what you're seeing more with the modern cars now, it's almost like they're a computer.
They're all computers.
And so, with an older car, because like my first car was a 97. So like if I took
a 97, you're so young.
Yeah, back in the 30s when Alan was living during the Great Depression.
Well, no, but like if I took my car to a mechanic,
I wish my first car was a 97.
But if I took my car to a mechanic or to a friend who can fix cars, most likely it's just you can look at the parts or whatever.
Yeah.
The car I have now,
you need an engineer.
I have to go to the actual shop and have them look at it because it's got a lot of modern features because it's a 2019 car now.
Right.
And so it's not just hey, fix the car. It's like hey, fix the computer inside the car to make it run. So some people will argue that I'd rather have the old car because
I hate these anti-lock brakes. They're terrible.
So I mean,
I know what you're saying.
It depends on do you prefer the computer car that's got all of the gadgets and internet access and Bluetooth or whatever, or do you just want a car that gets you to work? So is there a preference you guys have over technology?
Like in terms of the car? Because I'd take an old car any day.
I mean, it could be a car, it can be anything. There's probably stuff that you would prefer. Like you mentioned earlier, there's the ebooks because you can carry multiple books.
Right.
If you're going on a vacation or whatever, you can have all of your stuff in one thing. But some people like holding the book. They like the accomplishment. That felt very accomplished, I'm sure, to close the book and be I read this huge book instead of an e-reader where it's like,
I read 2 gigabytes.
Yeah. I don't know if I can stare at a screen that long. So yeah, probably books. But and this is something that I don't think anybody else is too familiar with, but video games have changed a lot recently. Yeah. And I don't mean just like in graphics. So what happens now is because everything's internet connected is you'll get a video game that has a lot of issues still. And then in the couple months that it takes them to actually print that game onto a physical cartridge, they'll keep working on a patch to send it. So if you don't have internet access, you can't like your game that you're getting is basically broken. So I actually miss old video games that were just complete, and you didn't have like a bunch of microtransactions and like trying to like get you to pay a $60 game plus, or $60 for a game plus, $10 for this, or $20 for that down the line. So I miss old video games.
See, that maybe that's the odd logic in me. I never understood why, because you can't do that in other professions. You can't give them in the plumbing field. You can't give someone half a pipe and be like, the rest of the pipe will come in later. In the meantime, just let the water run like this.
Yeah.
Oh, are you having some issues? Well, we'll replace the other third of a pipe.
Yeah.
Only in that digital thing can you give somebody half a job that's done and still get money for it and be like, oh, we'll fix this later.
Honestly, it's just software, like with editing software.
Yeah.
Very often, Sarah and I were talking about this before, very often Sarah and I are a year behind on certain editing
updates,
software because, the current year that might have a lot of new features, but they're getting all the bugs out. And so, up until, recently we were using the 2019 version.
We were actually using 2018.
Okay, so 2018. And so, now we can use the 2020 version, so like, it kind of goes what you were saying, Dan, like there's a lot of bugs with the new stuff. So we stay a year behind because we at least know that works.
With cooking, I do prefer maybe not, I'm not going back to like cast iron cooking over coals or anything, but air fryers are everywhere now, or Instapots. And I don't have any of those. So, and I'm doing fine. And I don't even know if there's a little bit of romance lost when you just dump your food into a pot and push a button and then come back and it's cooked or something like that.
See, I love that.
Absolutely.
I like the convenience of that.
See, I like having burns on my hand and cuts on my, scars.
I totally agree. One of the things I realized I've been missing, I need a mortar and pestle because I don't like using my food processor to like mix up small like spices and stuff like that when I'm making like taco seasoning, or like when I do like seasoning for breakfast sausage and I need to like break up the fennel. I don't want to use my food processor for that.
To his wounds, just Dan the apothecary.
That's right.
I got a leaf for that. That paper.
That's very interesting, though.
Yeah.
That's a technology form that, like we were saying earlier, that is sort of forgotten, that it's not very common. Yeah.
As we're concluding this episode, I will ask, since we're talking about inventions and stuff done by other people, have you guys kind of accidentally discovered something on your own or figure out some kind of rigging that you can do? So it's like you've invented or discovered something.
That's a good question. I don't know what
I think our field calls for it, because I'm just going to speak for all of us here. As much as we would love to do video production on the fancy Hollywood set, none of us have gotten there yet. And so
we've learned to stretch.
All of us have learned to use the equipment that you have the equipment that's old or whatever. And then if you're in the middle of a shoot and something fails, you have to think on your feet and be like, okay, how can we make this work for now? And then we'll fix it later. And so there have been many things that
too many
that, it looks good on the outside and people will see a show and it's like, oh, that's great. You guys did a fantastic job. Meanwhile, nobody knows that the whole set is being held by gaff tape.
That's right.
Yeah.
And like prayer to Jesus, hopefully that this does not come crashing down.
Well, in this term, we know, but outside it has a different meaning. But when you use flags in a production, it's not like flags that you wave. It's something that will block off light. If you're trying to direct lights for whatever cinematography or whatever lighting scheme you're after. And we've used, instead of having proper flags that are attached to C stands that are attached to, or gobo arms that are attached to C stands, we've used like music
music stands
before.
Podiums.
Podiums. I mean,
broomsticks. That, I mean, I can almost swear in the studio that we're in right now, there's a hamster on a wheel that's making the light go right now.
Well, look at this water bottle hanging from the boom mic.
Okay, that's my invention. So a counterweight to make sure the boom doesn't dip into frame. I put a zip tied water bottle,
an unopened water bottle. So
no one drank from this bottle, or it's going to come crashing down.
Yeah, exactly. And purposely, it's a water bottle because if it's too much, we could let out a little bit, or if we don't need enough, we could add some more.
See, we're like the MacGyvers.
Yes, MacGyver. That's a perfect way to do it.
So thank you guys for listening in. If you have some cool things that you've invented or discovered, or stuff that
you've rigged up,
please let us know on the social media in the comments, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to today's episode. You can find other episodes at doublestuffpod.com or on your favorite podcast apps. You can also join the fun on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Double Stuff Podcast and on Twitter at Double Stuff P. That's the letter P.